Hello, my name's Bishop Michael, and I'd like to share with you a few thoughts on Easter and what it means for myself, but also what it might mean for us as Christians today. St. John's Gospel opens up on that Easter morning with Mary Magdalene coming to the tomb to re-anoint Jesus, to put in more herbs and spices and clean wrappings and things, to give him the dignified burial he deserves. But when she arrives at the grave, she finds it already open, and she peers inside, and there are two angels sitting where Jesus was laid. A light shining in there, but no sign of Jesus. Of course, she's heartbroken at the loss of the one she loved and served so faithfully. And as she's weeping and crying, she's wondering, what's going on. And then she turns and feels something behind her, so she turns around and she sees Jesus there, but doesn't recognise him. She thinks he's the gardener, and she says, what's happening, Mary? And she says, well, someone's taken the body of my Lord, and I don't know where they've put it. And Jesus says to her, Mary. Now, that's the great moment of revelation for her. Suddenly, she understands what has happened. That he has risen as he said. And you can imagine what it's like. She want to leap to her feet and grab hold of Jesus and hug him. But he says, mysteriously really, the great words, don't hold on to me. Now, I learned as an older boy, noli me tangere, don't hold on to me. That Latin phrase is kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And to be honest, there are libraries of books and articles trying to work out what Jesus meant by those words. For some, it's John saying, well, Mary's caught in that little time between the resurrection and the ascension. That Jesus has to return to the Father, so he's only got a little bit of time left to sort out the last things before he returns, so he hasn't got time to hang around in the garden, talking to Mary and catching up on the good times. Others have suggested that perhaps what John's trying to say is that Mary, you can't hold on to this Jesus. The Jesus you want to grab hold of is the Jesus that was, the Jesus with whom you walked around Jerusalem and around Galilee and wandered up to Samaria. You had in your house. You were there when the rising of Lazarus. That's the Jesus you think you have back. And all that darkness and pain's gone. But John's saying to Mary, by the way he puts this narrative together, that Jesus is no longer. And that Jesus saying this to Mary, don't hold on to me, is a way of saying, well, Mary, it was easy for you and the others to be with me because you had me there physically in the flesh there. But now I'm returning to the Father and I'm gone. And if you want to find me, if you want to relate to me and interact with me, then it has to be through faith. I'm going to be there, but you have to change the way in which we've been interacting with the way you understood me, and that's going to be difficult for you. For Mary and for the disciples and for the church down through the ages, that's one of the great challenges. How do we find Jesus when we're not aware of his presence? So in those great moments of darkness in our own lives. A number of times I've been asked about Easter and Jesus in terms of the Syria situation, in terms of the refugees, It's all right for you, but what's Easter going to be like in Nauru? As one of the demonstrating students said to me the other day during their march. If Easter is going to be real and alive, and if the risen Christ is actually going to be proclaimed as living, then how do we find him? Where do we as believers begin to go to find him so we can make that a reality for the others? As the rest of the New Testament points out, and the Gospels of Jesus himself points out, It's all right to find Jesus when you're sitting down around the table and having a meal with him, you disciples and Mary Magdalene and all you others. But if you can't find Jesus in the weeping of the suffering, in the crying and distressed mothers in Syria, if you can't hear and see Jesus in the lives of those in the refugee camps, living in the gutters of our city, sleeping on the streets here in Melbourne, if you can't hear Jesus calling out to you there, you're not going to find him anywhere else. Because the living and risen, glorified Christ is there. And if we want to find him, we need to be there searching for him and engaging with him. So that's part of the magic of this story, isn't it? Or the power of this story is that here we have Mary searching for Jesus, and that's a key gospel theme. Jesus is not going to come and say, look, here I am. We have to be searching for him. He's calling us before we begin the search, but it's up to us to search. Now, Mary was a great lady, powerful lady, very spiritual, very holy, very righteous lady. You know, she was very close to Jesus. And yet look what she's doing. Her searching for the Lord is in the wrong place. It doesn't matter how deeply, how passionately, how committed is her searching for Jesus, she will not find him in that cemetery. It's not the searching that is the only key thing. It's where we search. Now, that searching goes on in all kinds of ways. As Christians, we understand this. I mean, the Jewish people lived in great hope and anticipation for their Messiah. And they searched for their Messiah, they hoped for their Messiah, they prayed for their Messiah, but they could never find their Messiah. When Jesus appeared among them and proclaimed the good news, he healed the sick, he raised the dead, he set people free, they still couldn't see him. Why? Why? Because they were searching for the Messiah passionately, religiously, faithfully, spiritually, but in the wrong places. It's interesting, isn't it, that the people that did find Jesus as their Lord and Messiah were those are the ones right on the bottom of the social system of the time. The first ones were fishermen, men who were considered to be uncouth and unkempt and unclean and unable to keep the law, therefore far from God. They were quickly followed by tax collectors, sinners, outcasts, lepers, adulterous people. They all came to Jesus. Why? Because they had that essential ingredient. They knew they needed something more than they could provide and the world and the religion of the times could provide. They needed a Christ. They needed forgiveness. They needed a Saviour. And so they were open to where God was being revealed in Jesus. They didn't rush to say, well, this is the only place we can find you. Let's go back to the prophets. Let's go back to the temple. Let's go back to the Psalms. Let's go back to the laws of Moses. In their need, they allowed Jesus to reveal himself to them in the world in which they were living. One of the great mysteries of this whole exchange is just how Mary reflects so much of our own lives as disciples. And it's so easy to do. Remember the Transfiguration story? These two are so close together in terms of meaning. On the Transfiguration, Peter, Paul, James and Peter and John went up to the top of the mountain. Jesus was transfigured and they were incredibly overcome with joy and all those wonderful feelings. But then what did Peter do? Peter wanted to put 3 tents. Lord, let's build 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and we can just stay here and be in nirvana for the rest of our lives. And what did Jesus say? No. My work's not here. My work and your work is down there at the bottom of the mountain. That's where we need to go. So whatever experience you have here is only an experience I give you so that you can take it and enliven the rest of the world with it. Just holding me on top of the mountain, never moving on from the mountaintop, is not going to help you or the world find me when everything turns turtle and you're struggling to survive. What Mary was doing, in a sense, was venerating Jesus in a shrine. It's almost as if she's taken a little statue of Jesus and put him on a shelf in her room, and she very faithfully and spiritually and religiously says her prayers there and gathers there and ponders there and reflects on the good old things of the past and how wonderful it was to have the Lord, not knowing that Jesus has moved on. Not understanding that he's no longer the Jesus of Nazareth that walked around the Sea of Galilee. It's the same, but he's been transformed. He is the risen, the living, the glorious Christ. And if we want to find him now, we have to find him as he is, not how we preferred him to be. And that's the danger. The Christ with whom we relate, the Christ we profess to believe in, the Christ we say we follow and serve as disciples, it so easily becomes the Christ into which we were baptised. We learnt from our parents, our grandparents. We learned at Sunday school, and our church sermons in the early days of our adulthood. But he has moved on, and we're still there looking to find him alive in what is in fact a cemetery. If we want to find Jesus Christ, the risen and glorious Christ, we're not going to just find him in our churches or in our faith communities of like-minded Christians. He's not just going to be alive for us in the scriptures. If we want to find Jesus, we have to find where he is from where he's calling us to be. In the gutters, in the places of darkness, wherever people are searching, crying, reaching out, suffering, dying, starving. That's where Jesus is. If we want to find him alive this Easter, there's no use looking for him in places that are representative of the dead past. Jesus says, Noli me tangere, don't hold me here. Don't turn me into an idol for your own satisfaction. For me, the great thing about Mary's story is that it's a warning and an encouragement. It tells me that Jesus is a bit like trying to pick up oil in our hands. You know, you get a handful of olive oil and it starts to filter through your fingers and spread out all over the ground. You can't hold the risen Lord. As soon as we find him, he's moved on. As soon as we feel comfortable in his presence and feel like sitting down and celebrating his presence with, he's already moved on. But Jesus Christ, the risen Lord, is ever moving out into the world at the bottom of the mountain. As he says in Luke's Gospel, he says, look, he's risen and he's gone before you into Jerusalem. You'll find him there. He's already moving on. He's already reaching out, drawing us to himself, that we can be where he is. Brothers and sisters, there's no absent Christ in the world today. There's a lot of us Mary Magdalens around. There's a lot of people don't know where they can find the risen Christ. Because we don't clarify it, they search in the wrong places. Let our commitment be this Easter, that we live the reality of Noli me tangere, and not hold on to the Christ and keep him as our own, but find him, live him, share him, that the world may find a light available in no other way. Amen.